When the ice cracked beneath Major Frank Morrison's boots, Samuel Hartwell knew three things. His dog Ranger was bleeding, $75 million in stolen art was about to sink into Penobscot Bay, and the man he'd once called Sir was about to kill them both. The Aurora Belle groaned against her frozen moorings as Morrison raised his service pistol, his breath forming white clouds in the bitter Maine air. Below deck, priceless paintings and sculptures, hidden for decades in the abandoned cruise ship's secret vault, shifted and creaked with each wave that crashed against the hull. "Should have taken my offer, Hartwell," Morrison snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. 50-50 was generous for a broken-down cripple. Ranger whimpered from where he lay crumpled against the ship's railing, crimson spreading across the snow beneath his gray coat. The German shepherd's amber eyes never left Sam's face, even as his strength ebbed away. One bullet, 2 lives. 75 million reasons to die. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 6 months earlier, Samuel Hartwell woke to the sound of metal grinding against metal, his prosthetic leg scraping the floor of his converted school bus as he reached for the morphine. The December wind howled through gaps in the ancient vehicle's walls, and frost had formed on the inside of the windows overnight. At 34, Sam felt twice his age, each Maine winter stealing another piece of his soul. Ranger lifted his massive head from the makeshift dog bed, amber eyes immediately alert to his master's pain. The German shepherd's thick coat couldn't hide the slight limp in his right hind leg, a war wound that matched Sam's own invisible scars. Neither spoke of Afghanistan anymore, but both still heard the echoes of that October morning when everything changed. "Morning, boy," Sam whispered, his voice hoarse from another night of screaming dreams. Ranger padded over, pressing his warm muzzle against Sam's trembling hand. The dog had learned to read the tremors, the cold sweats, the 1,000-yard stare that meant his human was drowning again. Outside, Bangor's working-class neighborhood was waking up. Fishing boats headed for the harbor, their diesel engines cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. This was a community that understood hard work and harder winters, where neighbors looked out for each other because nobody else would. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, 78 and tough as the lobster traps her late husband once hauled, knocked on the bus door with her usual offering, a thermos of coffee and yesterday's leftover pot roast. "Samuel, you decent in there?" Sam pulled on his prosthetic with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from 3 years of morning rituals. The VA had given him the basic model, functional but unforgiving, especially in cold weather. Some days he wondered if they'd measured wrong on purpose. "Come in, Mrs. Patterson." "Coffee smells like heaven." She settled into the passenger seat that Sam had converted into a kitchen chair, her weathered hands steady despite her age. "You see that auction notice posted downtown? City's finally selling that old cruise ship." The Aurora Belle had haunted Pier 7 for 12 years, a ghost ship that nobody wanted and everybody ignored. Sam had walked past it countless times during his darker periods, drawn to its loneliness. The massive vessel sat listing slightly to port, her white paint peeling like old scabs, portholes dark as dead eyes. "Starting bid's only $8,500, Mrs. Patterson continued, watching Sam's face carefully. "Might make a decent place to weather the winter. Better than this tin can anyway." Sam's disability check was 3 weeks late, some bureaucratic snafu that meant choosing between heating oil and Ranger's hip medication. The bus's furnace had died Tuesday, and his savings account showed exactly $8,847, everything he had left in the world. Ranger suddenly stood at attention, his ears pricked toward the harbor. Something had caught his interest, something beyond human perception. The dog whined softly, a sound Sam had learned meant important. 3 days before Christmas, Sam stood in the courthouse steps, holding a crumpled auction flyer, his breath forming white clouds in the bitter Maine air. The Aurora Belle loomed in the distance like a steel mountain, her superstructure cutting against the gray December sky. Ranger pressed close to his left side, the dog's usual position when Sam's anxiety spiked. "You sure about this, Uncle Sam?" Tommy Hartwell, 19 and built like the lobster fisherman he'd become, shifted nervously from foot to foot. "That's literally every penny you got." Sam's nephew had their family's stubborn streak, the same trait that had gotten Sam through basic training and 3 tours overseas. But Tommy's concern was valid. $8,847 represented 3 years of careful saving, every disability check stretched to its limit. "Sometimes you gotta risk it all to get anywhere," Sam said, though his voice lacked conviction. The morphine hadn't touched this morning's pain, and his prosthetic felt like it was grinding bone against metal. Inside the courthouse, the auction room smelled of coffee and disappointment. A handful of scrap metal dealers sat in folding chairs, calculators ready. At the back, a man in an expensive gray overcoat took notes on a leather portfolio. Something about him made Ranger's hackles rise. "Lot 17, the auctioneer called. "Aurora Belle, 1997 construction, currently moored Pier 7, sold as is, buyer responsible for towing within 30 days, opening bid $8,500. "8.5, called a dealer in Carhartt coveralls. Sam's heart hammered. This was insane. He was about to bet his life on a floating tomb. "9,000, he heard himself say. The room turned. The scrap dealers sized him up, disabled veteran with a service dog, probably desperate. Their expressions ranged from pity to annoyance. 9.5, Carhartt countered. 10,000, Sam said, his voice stronger now. The dealers exchanged glances. 10 grand was getting close to their profit margin on scrap steel. One by one, they shook their heads. "Going once, going twice." The auctioneer's gavel hovered. "Sold to bidder 14 for $10,000. Sam's legs nearly gave out. He'd done it. He owned a cruise ship. The man in the gray overcoat approached as Sam signed the paperwork. "Congratulations," the stranger said, extending a manicured hand. "Frank Morrison, I represent certain interests regarding maritime salvage." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's quite a purchase for a veteran on disability." Ranger growled low in his throat, a sound Sam had learned to trust completely. "Just looking for somewhere to live," Sam replied carefully. "Of course." "Well, if you discover anything unusual aboard your new home, I hope you'll consider reaching out." Morrison handed Sam a business card embossed with federal-looking eagles. Sometimes these old ships carry more than just rust and memories. That evening, Sam and Ranger stood on Pier 7 as the sun set behind the Aurora Belle. Up close, the ship was even more imposing, 9 decks of peeling paint and broken dreams. The gangway creaked ominously under Sam's weight, his prosthetic legs struggling with the steep angle. The main lobby still held traces of former grandeur. Faded murals depicted tropical scenes, and crystal chandeliers hung like frozen tears from the ceiling. Their footsteps echoed in the vast space, Ranger's claws clicking on marble floors. "Home, sweet home, boy," Sam whispered, but his voice carried a tremor. They climbed to the captain's quarters on Deck 8, Sam pausing every few steps to catch his breath. The private suite was surprisingly well preserved, leather furniture, a mahogany bar, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Someone had left the heat running on minimal power. The diesel generator still chugged in the engine room. Sam collapsed into the captain's chair, exhaustion overwhelming him. 3 years of living in a school bus had prepared him for cramped quarters, but this felt different, larger, lonelier. Ranger refused his dinner, instead pacing the cabin with unusual agitation. The dog kept returning to the wall behind the bar, sniffing at the mahogany paneling and whining softly. "What is it, boy? Just old ship smells?" But Ranger's behavior grew more insistent. He pawed at a particular panel, his whines becoming more urgent. Sam had learned to pay attention when his dog acted strange. Ranger's instincts had saved both their lives in Afghanistan. The panel looked identical to the others, but when Sam pressed against it, he felt a slight give. Behind the portrait of a naval officer, his fingers found a small brass latch hidden in the frame's shadow. The panel swung inward with a soft click, revealing darkness beyond. "Well, I'll be damned," Sam breathed. A narrow staircase descended into the ship's bowels, lit by emergency lighting that shouldn't have been working. The air smelled different here, cooler, with a hint of machine oil and something else, something precious. Ranger bounded down the steps without hesitation, his tail wagging for the first time all day. Sam followed more carefully, his prosthetic catching on the steep treads. The staircase opened into a room that took Sam's breath away. Climate-controlled and windowless, the space was lined with metal storage units and professional archival equipment. Rows of wooden crates bore shipping labels in multiple languages, and several items sat under protective cloth covers. Sam pulled back the nearest cloth, revealing a bronze sculpture that seemed to glow under the artificial lighting. Even with his limited art knowledge, he recognized the signature on the base. Rodin. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Ranger sat at attention beside a bank of monitors that had suddenly flickered to life, motion activated. A grainy video began playing automatically, black and white footage of a man in a naval uniform, probably in his 60s, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this," the officer said, his voice carrying the authority of command, "then you've found what I've spent 30 years protecting. My name is Captain Harold Hartwell, and this collection represents something more valuable than money. It represents memory." Sam's heart stopped. Hartwell, his family name. "During the war and in the decades after, people entrusted me with their most precious possessions. Holocaust survivors who needed to hide family heirlooms. Resistance fighters who smuggled art from occupied territories. Families fleeing communist regimes who couldn't carry their heritage but couldn't bear to lose it." The captain's eyes seemed to look directly at Sam through the decades. "I created this repository not to steal but to preserve. Every piece here has documentation, provenance, and a story of survival. If you've found this room, you have a choice to make. You can take what's here and disappear, or you can help me complete the mission, return these treasures to their rightful owners, or at least ensure they're preserved for history." The video flickered and continued. "I pray whoever finds this understands the weight of what they're holding. This isn't just art. It's proof that beauty can survive even the darkest times." The screen went black, leaving Sam alone with Ranger in a room worth more than most people saw in a lifetime. His hands shook as he opened another crate, revealing a painting that made his chest tighten with recognition. A Van Gogh sketch he'd seen in a book about stolen Nazi art. Ranger nuzzled his hand, sensing his human's emotional overload. The dog's warm nose grounded Sam, bringing him back from the edge of panic. Outside, the winter wind howled against the ship's hull, but inside the secret room, Sam felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. Purpose. The question was whether he was strong enough to handle what came next. Christmas morning brought no peace to the Aurora Belle. Sam had spent the night cataloging the treasure room's contents, his military training kicking in despite his shock. 17 crates, 43 individual pieces, and documentation that read like a history of 20th century survival. Each item told a story of loss, hope, and the desperate human need to preserve beauty in the face of destruction. Ranger hadn't left his side, the dog's presence a steady anchor as Sam's mind reeled with implications. The German shepherd seemed to understand the gravity of their discovery, his usual playfulness replaced by alert vigilance. The ship's satellite phone, apparently still connected despite the vessel's abandonment, rang at precisely 9 a.m. Sam stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Hartwell Residence," he said, the irony not lost on him. "Samuel, my boy!" The voice was hearty, familiar in a way that made Sam's blood run cold. "Merry Christmas." "This is Major Frank Morrison. I believe we met yesterday at the courthouse." Sam's hand tightened on the receiver. Ranger's ears pricked forward, sensing tension. "What can I do for you, Major?" "Actually, it's what I can do for you. You see, I've been tracking that particular vessel for some time. There are complications regarding its contents that a civilian might not understand. Federal implications, if you catch my meaning." The words were friendly, but underneath lay something harder, a threat wrapped in concern. "I'm not sure I follow," Sam said carefully. "Of course not. Why would you? But you served your country honorably, Samuel. Afghanistan, wasn't it? Kandahar province? I heard about what happened to your unit. Terrible business, that IED attack." Sam's prosthetic leg suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. How did Morrison know about Kandahar? That information wasn't public record. "I'd like to come aboard and discuss this properly," Morrison continued. "Today, if possible. There are protocols to follow when certain types of historical artifacts are discovered. Wouldn't want you to inadvertently violate any federal statutes." The line went dead before Sam could respond. "Shit," he whispered, looking down at Ranger. "We might be in trouble, boy." 2 hours later, Morrison arrived at Pier 7 in a black SUV with government plates. He wasn't alone. 2 men in similar overcoats flanked him as they approached the gangway. All 3 moved with military precision, their eyes constantly scanning for threats or escape routes. Sam met them at the ship's entrance, Ranger at his side. The dog's hackles were raised, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "Easy, soldier," Morrison said, though whether he addressed Sam or the dog wasn't clear. "Impressive animal. German shepherds make excellent military working dogs, don't they?" "Ranger's retired," Sam said. "Like me." Morrison's smile was predatory. "Retirement isn't always permanent, Samuel. Sometimes duty calls us back to service." He gestured to his companions. "These are my associates, Mr. Chen and Mr. Volkov. We represent certain government interests in maritime recovery operations." The names were obviously false, but Sam nodded. "What exactly do you want to recover, Major?" "May we come aboard? It's cold out here, and this conversation requires privacy." Against every instinct, Sam led them to the captain's quarters. Ranger stayed pressed against his leg, the dog's tension radiating through their contact. Morrison's eyes immediately fixed on the portrait behind the bar, the same portrait that concealed the hidden latch. "Lovely ship," Morrison said, running his fingers along the mahogany paneling. "These old cruise lines spared no expense. I imagine there are all sorts of interesting spaces aboard a vessel this size. Hidden storage, perhaps. Climate-controlled compartments for valuables?" Sam's mouth went dry. "Just what I've seen so far. Lots of empty cabins and rust." "Of course." Morrison's fingers traced the portrait's frame with disturbing familiarity. "You know, Samuel, I've been researching your family history. Fascinating stuff. Your great-uncle Harold served in the Pacific during World War II. Decorated officer, from what I understand. Whatever happened to old Harold?" The casual mention of family hit Sam like a physical blow. Harold Hartwell. The same name as the captain in the video. Morrison knew. Had always known. "I wouldn't know," Sam lied. "My family doesn't talk much about the war years." "Pity. Harold was quite the character, from what military records suggest. Served on several vessels, including some involved in cultural preservation operations. The Army had programs during and after the war, you understand, recovering stolen art, protecting historical artifacts from destruction. Noble work. Morrison's associates had spread out, one near the door, another by the windows, professional positioning that made Sam's combat instincts scream danger. Sometimes, Morrison continued, these preservation operations involved temporary storage in unusual locations. Ships were particularly useful, mobile, secure, easy to move artifacts away from war zones or political instability. Ranger's growl deepened, his amber eyes fixed on Morrison with unmistakable hostility. Interesting dog reaction, Morrison observed. Animals often sense things humans miss. Guilt, deception, hidden agendas. His smile turned cold. Or maybe he just doesn't like authority figures. Maybe he's a good judge of character, Sam said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Morrison's friendly mask slipped slightly, revealing something predatory underneath. Let me be direct, Samuel. This ship contains materials of national importance. Materials that require federal oversight and proper documentation. You're a patriot. You understand the need to follow proper channels. And if I refuse? Why would you refuse? You'd be compensated, of course, handsomely. Think of it as a consulting fee for your assistance with a national security matter. Sam's mind raced. This wasn't a federal operation. It was a shakedown. Morrison might have military credentials, but his approach felt more like organized crime than government procedure. I need time to think about it, Sam said. Morrison's expression hardened. Time is a luxury we don't have, Samuel. Word travels fast in communities like this. Soon everyone will know about your discovery. Media attention, legal complications, tax implications. Very messy for a man on disability who just wants to live quietly. The threat was clear now. Cooper or face consequences. I'll give you 48 hours to consider our generous offer, Morrison continued, standing and signaling his associates. After that, things become more complicated. As they reached the door, Morrison paused. By the way, that's a beautiful dog. Hate to see anything happen to such a loyal companion. These old ships can be dangerous places, lots of ways for accidents to occur. The moment they left, Sam collapsed into the captain's chair, his hands shaking with rage and fear. Ranger immediately moved to his side, pressing his warm body against Sam's leg. They know, boy, Sam whispered. They know everything. Outside, the winter wind howled across Penobscot Bay. But inside the Aurora Belle, Sam felt the weight of impossible choices. He was trapped between preserving a historical treasure and protecting the only family he had left, a loyal dog who'd already sacrificed too much for one broken veteran. The satellite phone rang again. This time, Sam let it ring. But as darkness fell over the harbor, Sam realized that ignoring Morrison wouldn't make him disappear. The Major wanted something specific, and men like that didn't take no for an answer. Sam looked at Ranger's trusting eyes and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He was going to fight. The story broke on New Year's Eve. Someone had leaked photos to the Portland Press-Herald, grainy images of Sam entering the Aurora Belle, speculation about mysterious government vehicles at the pier, and wild rumors about treasure aboard the abandoned cruise ship. By midnight, the story had gone viral. Sam woke to his satellite phone ringing incessantly, and the sound of vehicles pulling up to Pier 7. Through the captain's quarters windows, he saw news vans, curious onlookers, and Deputy Mike O'Brien trying to maintain some semblance of order. Ranger pressed against the glass, his hackles raised at the crowd below. Disabled Maine veteran discovers fortune aboard abandoned ship, read the headline on Sam's phone. The article was surprisingly accurate, quoting anonymous sources about priceless artwork and federal interest in the discovery. Someone with inside knowledge had talked. His phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. "Uncle Sam, reporters at my boat asking questions." What the hell is going on? Before Sam could respond, Mrs. Patterson called, "Samuel, dear, there are news people asking about you. I told them you were a good man who deserved whatever blessings came his way, but they keep pushing. What should I tell them?" "Tell them nothing, Mrs. Patterson. I'll handle this." But handling it felt impossible. By noon, the crowd had tripled. Sam counted reporters from 3 networks, 2 newspapers, and what looked like federal agents in unmarked cars. Someone had set up a hot dog cart, turning his personal crisis into a carnival. Dr. Catherine Reynolds arrived on the second day, a composed woman in her 50s with silver hair and intelligent eyes that reminded Sam of his grandmother. She carried credentials from Harvard's Fogg Art Museum and spoke with quiet authority. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm here to help authenticate your discovery. I've dealt with similar situations involving wartime art preservation." Ranger, usually suspicious of strangers, approached her without hesitation. She extended her hand and he sniffed before settling beside her chair, a gesture of trust that Sam had learned to respect. "How do I know you're not working with Morrison?" Sam asked. "Because Major Morrison was dishonorably discharged from the Army in 2019 for financial irregularities. He's wanted by Interpol in connection with stolen art trafficking. The credentials he showed you were forgeries." Sam's blood ran cold. "How do you know about Morrison?" "Because he's been tracking this ship for 3 years. Your great-uncle Harold was on our watch list, not as a criminal, but as someone who might have preserved important pieces during the chaos after World War II. When Harold died, Morrison somehow gained access to his personal effects and learned about the Aurora Bell." "Doctor." Reynolds opened her briefcase, revealing documentation that made Sam's head spin. Photographs of artwork, shipping manifests, letters between Harold Hartwell and various European museums. The paper trail stretched back 70 years. "Your great-uncle was a hero, Mr. Hartwell. He saved dozens of pieces from destruction, kept meticulous records, and tried to return items to their rightful owners when possible. What he couldn't return, he preserved. This collection represents one of the most significant private preservation efforts of the 20th century." Sam stared at a photograph of Harold in dress uniform, holding a small painting. The family resemblance was unmistakable. The same stubborn jaw, the same determined eyes. "Why didn't my family know about this?" Harold worked in classified Army cultural preservation units. Even after the war, discretion was paramount. Too many people wanted these pieces for the wrong reasons. "Doctor." Reynolds glanced toward the windows where reporters clustered. "As you're learning." She spent the next 6 hours cataloging the collection with Sam and Ranger. Each piece had documentation, original purchase receipts, letters from grateful families, sometimes photographs of the items in their original settings before war scattered them across the globe. A Van Gogh sketch rescued from a burning Parisian gallery, Jewish family silver hidden from the Nazis, manuscripts saved from the bombing of Monte Cassino. Each item carried the weight of human survival. "The total value is difficult to estimate," Dr. Reynolds said finally. "$75 million is conservative. Some of these pieces are irreplaceable." That evening, the first death threat arrived by email. "Rich veterans while real Americans struggle. Accident can happen to anyone." Sam forwarded it to Deputy O'Brien, but the message was clear. Not everyone saw his discovery as a blessing. The next morning brought Morrison's return, but this time he wasn't alone. 3 SUVs arrived simultaneously, disgorging men in suits who moved with military precision. Morrison himself looked different, less friendly, more predatory. "Samuel," he called from the pier. "Time for our conversation." Sam met them at the gangway with Ranger at his side and Dr. Reynolds behind him. The art historian's presence clearly surprised Morrison. "Dr. Reynolds," Morrison said smoothly. "Still playing White Knight for stolen artwork?" "Still stealing it, Frank?" she replied coolly. The dynamic between them crackled with history. Morrison's associates flanked the group, hands resting inside their jackets. "Let me be clear," Morrison said to Sam. "This collection belongs to the United States government under the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program provisions. Dr. Reynolds can show you all the paperwork she wants, but federal authority supersedes private claims." "Bullshit," Dr. Reynolds responded. "You have no legal standing, Frank. Your discharge was specifically for attempting to steal cultural artifacts in Syria." Morrison's mask slipped completely. "You always were too smart for your own good, Catherine." "But smart doesn't stop bullets." Ranger stepped forward, his body language shifting into full protection mode. The dog's growl carried a promise of violence that made Morrison's men shift nervously. "That's a threat, Major," Sam said quietly, "in front of witnesses." "Former Major," Dr. Reynolds corrected. "And yes, I'm recording this conversation." Morrison's face flushed red. "You have 24 hours to transfer ownership of this collection to my organization. Refuse, and we'll expose your great-uncle as a Nazi collaborator. Every piece in this collection will be tied to war crimes. Your family name will be mud." "Harold Hartwell saved these pieces from the Nazis," Dr. Reynolds said firmly. "Prove it in court," Morrison snapped. "While the media destroys this crippled veteran's life, and his dog suffers the consequences." The threat against Ranger was the final straw. Sam's military training kicked in, assessing threats and potential responses. Morrison had 6 men, maybe more in the vehicles, professional criminals with government resources behind them. But Sam had something they didn't, the moral high ground in a community that was starting to rally around him. "Get off my ship," Sam said quietly. Morrison smiled coldly. 24 hours, Samuel. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." As they left, Dr. Reynolds squeezed Sam's shoulder. "He's bluffing about the Nazi connection. Harold's records are meticulous. Every piece has clean provenance. But Frank is desperate, which makes him dangerous." That night, Sam sat in the treasure room with Ranger, surrounded by 70 years of preserved history. Each piece represented someone's hope that beauty could survive destruction, that memory could outlast war. His great-uncle Harold had spent decades protecting these treasures. Now the responsibility had fallen to Sam, a broken veteran who could barely protect himself. But as Ranger rested his head on Sam's lap, amber eyes full of unwavering loyalty, Sam realized he wasn't as broken as he'd thought. He had something worth fighting for, something bigger than his own pain. The question was whether he was strong enough to win. Outside, winter wind howled across the harbor, carrying the scent of snow and the promise of harder days ahead. But inside the Aurora Belle, surrounded by proof that beauty could survive even the darkest times, Sam Hartwell began to plan his war. The blizzard hit Bangor like God's own fist, transforming the Aurora Belle into an island of steel surrounded by white fury. Sam watched from the captain's quarters as snow piled against the ship's hull, sealing them off from the outside world. The storm had been building for hours, and weather reports promised it would rage for at least 2 days. Perfect conditions for men like Morrison to work without witnesses. Ranger paced the cabin, his anxiety feeding off Sam's own growing dread. The dog's ears swiveled constantly, tracking sounds that human ears couldn't detect. Every creak of the ship's hull, every whistle of wind through the superstructure, made both of them tense. "Easy, boy," Sam whispered, but his own hands shook as he checked the shotgun Deputy O'Brien had quietly left behind. 2 shells. Against Morrison's small army, it might as well be a slingshot. The satellite phone had gone dead 6 hours ago, cut at the source rather than damaged by weather. Sam's cell phone showed no signal. The storm had knocked out the nearest tower, or someone had jammed communications. Either way, they were alone. At 11 p.m., the ship's emergency lighting flickered and died. The generator's steady hum ceased, leaving only the howl of wind and the sound of Sam's own ragged breathing. Ranger pressed against his leg, solid and warm in the darkness. "They're here," Sam said quietly. The first sound was barely audible over the storm, boots on metal moving with practiced stealth across the main deck, multiple sets coordinating their approach, military precision in every step. Sam grabbed his crutch and began moving toward the treasure room, Ranger at his side. If Morrison wanted the collection, he'd have to come and take it. But halfway down the corridor, emergency lighting snapped on throughout the ship, battery-powered floods that turned the passages into stark landscapes of light and shadow. Morrison's voice echoed through the ship's intercom system. "Samuel, there's no point in hiding. We've disabled your communications, cut your power, and sealed the harbor. This storm is going to rage for 36 hours. Plenty of time to conclude our business properly." Sam pressed himself against a bulkhead, mind racing. They'd taken control of the ship's systems, which meant someone with technical knowledge was involved. This wasn't just a smash-and-grab operation. "I know you're listening," Morrison continued, his voice carrying the tone of reasonable authority that Sam remembered from officers in Afghanistan. "I also know you're scared. But think about this rationally, son. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. Your dog is already limping. Wouldn't want to see him get hurt worse." The threat against Ranger sent ice through Sam's veins. Morrison had noticed the dog's war wound, filed it away as leverage. "I'm prepared to be generous," Morrison's voice continued. $5 million for your cooperation. That's more money than you'll see in 5 lifetimes of disability checks. Enough to get Ranger the best medical care, enough to live comfortably somewhere warm. Sam reached the treasure room and sealed himself inside with Ranger. The climate control was on backup power, humming quietly in the darkness. Around them, 70 years of preserved history waited in climate-controlled silence. "Last chance, Samuel." Morrison's voice had turned harder. "Open the room, accept payment, and walk away. Or we take it anyway, and you become a casualty of this storm." Sam's prosthetic leg throbbed with phantom pain as he moved among the crates. His great-uncle Harold's voice echoed in his memory from the recorded message, "You can take what's here and disappear, or you can help me complete the mission." The mission, not profit, but preservation, not theft, but protection. Boots thundered down the stairway outside the treasure room. Morrison had given up on negotiation. "Breaching charges on my mark," came a voice through the reinforced door. "Professional. Military. These weren't art thieves, they were soldiers gone rogue." Sam positioned himself behind a large crate, shotgun ready. Ranger crouched beside him, every muscle coiled for action. The dog's amber eyes reflected the emergency lighting, and in them Sam saw the same determination that had carried them both through hell in Afghanistan. The door exploded inward with a deafening roar. Morrison entered first, pistol drawn, flanked by 2 men in tactical gear. Their movements were textbook room-clearing procedure, weapons tracking in coordinated arcs. "Stand down, Samuel," Morrison commanded. "This doesn't have to end badly." Sam rose from behind the crate, shotgun aimed at Morrison's center mass. "It already ended badly when you threatened my dog." Morrison's smile was cold as winter wind. "Your dog?" "Yes, let's talk about Ranger. Beautiful animal." German shepherds are incredibly loyal, aren't they? Loyal unto death, some might say." One of Morrison's men shifted position, angling for a clear shot at Ranger. The dog noticed immediately, hackles rising as he prepared to spring. "You know what I learned about you in Afghanistan, Samuel?" Morrison's voice carried casual menace. You always put others before yourself. Your men, your mission, even stray dogs. It's a weakness that gets people killed. How do you know about Afghanistan? Sam's finger tightened on the trigger. Morrison's grin widened. Because I was there, son. Not officially, of course. Private contractor work. Cleaning up messes that the regular army couldn't handle. The pieces clicked together in Sam's mind with horrible clarity. The IED attack, the faulty intelligence about that convoy route. Very good. Yes, my information put your unit in that kill zone, but it wasn't faulty, it was deliberate. We needed a distraction while we moved certain cultural artifacts out of Kandahar province. Your sacrifice served a greater purpose. Sam's vision tunneled with rage. Morrison hadn't just threatened him, he'd been responsible for the attack that killed Sam's brothers-in-arms and cost him his leg. You son of a bitch, Sam whispered. Business, Samuel. Nothing personal. Though I admit, when I learned one of my casualties had inherited this collection, it felt like fate. Ranger sensed his master's emotional state and shifted protectively, placing himself between Sam and Morrison's men. The dog's lips pulled back in a silent snarl. Last offer, Morrison said. 5 million, and we all walk away. Refuse, and I kill your dog first. Make you watch, then we take the collection anyway. Sam's world narrowed to a single moment of absolute clarity. He was outgunned, outnumbered, and trapped. But he'd been in worse situations in Afghanistan, and Ranger had saved his life more than once. Time to return the favor. Counteroffer, Sam said quietly. Go to hell. Morrison's expression turned murderous. Kill the dog first. The gunman swung his weapon toward Ranger, but the German Shepherd was already moving. 80 pounds of trained fury launched across the room, hitting the gunman's center mass and sending him crashing into a priceless sculpture. Sam's shotgun boomed in the enclosed space, the blast taking Morrison's second man in the chest and spinning him into the wall. The sound was deafening, but through the ringing in his ears, Sam heard Morrison's pistol fire. Ranger yelped, a sound that cut through Sam's heart like broken glass. The German Shepherd stumbled, crimson spreading across his gray coat, but his amber eyes never left Morrison's face. Even wounded, the dog positioned himself between his master and the man who'd hurt them both. Morrison raised his pistol again, this time aiming at Sam. Should have taken the money. But Ranger wasn't finished. With his last reserves of strength, the loyal dog lunged again, jaws clamping down on Morrison's gun hand. The pistol discharged wildly as Morrison screamed, the bullet gouging concrete from the ceiling. Sam dove forward, his prosthetic leg failing under the sudden movement, sending him crashing into Morrison. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs, fighting desperately for control of the weapon. Around them, priceless artwork bore witness to a struggle between greed and loyalty, between those who would steal history and those willing to die protecting it. In the end, it came down to a simple truth that Ranger had always understood. Some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The gunshot echoed through the treasure room like thunder, followed by a silence so profound that Sam could hear his own heartbeat. Morrison's body lay crumpled against a crate of Renaissance manuscripts, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. The pistol had discharged during their struggle, the bullet finding its mark in Morrison's chest at point-blank range. But Sam's victory felt hollow as he turned toward Ranger. The German Shepherd lay on his side, breathing in shallow, labored gasps. Crimson soaked through his thick coat, spreading across the polished concrete floor. His amber eyes, usually so bright and alert, had dimmed to a flicker of their former intensity. "No, no, no," Sam whispered, crawling toward his companion, despite the agony shooting through his damaged leg. "Not you, boy. Not after everything we've been through." Ranger's tail thumped weakly against the floor as Sam reached him, a gesture of love even in his final moments. The bullet had found its mark in the dog's chest, and from the foam speckling his muzzle, Sam knew it had punctured a lung. Sam cradled Ranger's massive head in his lap, his hands coming away slick with blood. The dog who had saved him from suicide, who had pulled him from burning vehicles in Afghanistan, who had been his only family for 3 years, was dying because Sam had been too stubborn to walk away. "I'm sorry," Sam choked out, tears streaming down his face. "This is all my fault. I should have taken the money, should have kept you safe." Ranger's breathing grew more ragged, each inhale a struggle. But his eyes remained fixed on Sam's face with the same unwavering devotion he'd shown since the day they found each other. Through the ship's broken intercom system, Sam could hear Morrison's remaining men calling out for their leader. Soon they would come looking, and Sam had no strength left to fight. His shotgun was empty. Morrison's pistol had slid under a heavy crate, and his prosthetic leg had been damaged in the struggle. The storm continued to rage outside, snow piling against the portholes until the room felt like a tomb. The emergency lighting flickered intermittently, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with humanity's greatest artistic achievements. Sam pressed his face against Ranger's warm fur, inhaling the familiar scent of his companion one last time. "You saved me again, didn't you, boy? Just like always." Ranger's tongue flicked out weakly, trying to lick Sam's cheek in a gesture of comfort. Even dying, the dog was more concerned about his human than himself. "I wish I could have saved you back," Sam whispered. "You deserved so much better than this. Better than me." The sound of boots on metal stairs echoed from above. Morrison's men were coming, and when they found their leader dead, they would want revenge. Sam had perhaps minutes before they breached the treasure room again. He looked around at the collection his great-uncle Harold had spent a lifetime protecting. Van Gogh sketches, Rodin sculptures, manuscripts that chronicled humanity's greatest triumphs and darkest hours. Each piece represented someone's hope that beauty could survive destruction, that memory could outlast war. Now it would all be lost because Sam couldn't let go of his pride. Ranger's breathing became increasingly labored, each exhale potentially his last. Sam felt the dog's body growing heavier in his arms as life slowly ebbed away. The loyal German shepherd who had followed him through hell was finally going somewhere Sam couldn't follow. "Tell me what to do, boy," Sam pleaded. "How do I live without you?" But Ranger couldn't answer. His amber eyes were already glazing over, the spark of intelligence that had made him so much more than just a dog fading like a candle in the wind. The intercom crackled to life again. "Morrison, status report." The voice carried the hard edge of professional killers who were starting to worry about their payday. Sam realized with crystalline clarity that he was going to die in this room surrounded by stolen history and his best friend's blood. The thought should have terrified him, but instead it brought an odd sense of peace. He'd spent 3 years feeling like a burden, wondering why he'd survived Afghanistan when better men hadn't. Now he knew. He'd lived to find this place, to protect these treasures, to give Ranger a purpose worthy of his sacrifice. The dog had died a hero's death, protecting something bigger than both of them. "I understand now," Sam whispered to Ranger's still form. "You weren't just my dog. You were my teacher, teaching me that some things are worth dying for." The boots on the stairs were getting closer. Sam could hear voices calling Morrison's name, growing more urgent as they received no response. Soon they would override the sealed door or blow it open, and Sam's war would be over. He thought about Mrs. Patterson, probably huddled in her small house, worried sick about the young veteran she'd tried so hard to help. About Tommy, who might never understand why his uncle chose death over dishonor. About Dr. Reynolds, who had tried to show him that he was part of something larger than his own pain. But mostly he thought about Ranger, and the 3 years of unconditional love the dog had given him. Love without judgment, without conditions, without expectations beyond simple loyalty. The kind of love that Sam had thought died in the Afghan desert along with his leg and his faith in humanity. A metallic clang echoed through the chamber as someone began working on the door. They would be inside within minutes, and then this would all be over. Sam pressed his forehead against Ranger's cooling muzzle and closed his eyes. "Wait for me on the other side, boy. I'll be along soon." In the distance, barely audible over the storm and the sound of forced entry, Sam heard something that made him lift his head. Sirens. Multiple vehicles cutting through the night despite the blizzard. Hope flickered in his chest like a dying ember suddenly given air. Ranger's sacrifice might not have been in vain after all. As the treasure room door began to buckle under assault, Sam Hartwell held his dying dog and waited for salvation or damnation, no longer certain which he deserved, but certain finally of who he was meant to be. The sirens weren't Sam's imagination. Through the Aurora Bell's reinforced hull, he could hear multiple emergency vehicles cutting through the blizzard. Police cruisers, ambulances, and what sounded like federal tactical units. The cavalry was coming, but they might be too late. Morrison's men had nearly breached the treasure room door when the ship's intercom crackled to life with a new voice. Deputy Mike O'Brien's familiar Maine accent cutting through the static. "This is the Bangor Police Department. You are surrounded. Surrender immediately, and you will not be harmed." The metallic clanging at the door stopped abruptly. Sam heard urgent whispers, then running footsteps as Morrison's surviving men abandoned their assault to deal with the larger threat above. But none of that mattered now. Ranger lay motionless in Sam's arms, his amber eyes staring at nothing. The magnificent German shepherd who had saved Sam's life countless times had given everything to protect him one final time. The dog's blood had stopped flowing, his chest no longer rising and falling with labored breaths. "You did it, boy," Sam whispered, his voice breaking. "You saved me again." Through his tears, Sam noticed something clutched in Ranger's front paw, a small piece of metal that hadn't been there before. With trembling fingers, he pried it loose. It was a military dog tag, weathered and old, with text that made Sam's heart stop. Atlas, MWDK9, Afghanistan, 2018, Handler, CPLS, Hartwell. The world tilted on its axis. Atlas. The military working dog from his unit in Afghanistan, the German shepherd who had detected the IED that cost Sam his leg. The dog who had saved half the squad before disappearing in the chaos of the explosion. Everyone assumed Atlas had been killed in the blast. But Atlas had survived, had somehow made his way back to the States. Had found Sam during his darkest hour 3 years ago and stayed, protecting him under a new name. Ranger was Atlas, had always been Atlas. The loyal dog hadn't just been Sam's companion, he'd been his guardian angel, the living embodiment of their shared trauma and survival. And now, just as he'd protected the squad from that IED, Atlas had protected Sam from Morrison's greed. Heavy footsteps thundered down the stairway as law enforcement breached the ship. Sam heard shouted commands, the sound of Morrison's men surrendering, and then Deputy O'Brien's voice calling his name. "Sam, where are you, son?" "Down here," Sam called back, his voice hoarse with grief. The treasure room door, already weakened by Morrison's assault, gave way to police battering rams. Deputy O'Brien entered first, weapon drawn, followed by FBI agents in tactical gear. Their eyes took in the scene, Morrison's corpse, the wounded gunman unconscious against the wall, and Sam cradling his dead dog among millions of dollars in stolen art. "Jesus, Sam," O'Brien breathed, holstering his weapon. "What happened here?" "Morrison tried to steal the collection," Sam managed. "Atlas, Ranger. He saved my life. Again." Dr. Catherine Reynolds appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Behind her came a team of federal agents and art recovery specialists, their expressions shifting from professional alertness to amazement as they took in the treasure room's contents. "The collection is intact?" Dr. Reynolds asked, though her eyes were fixed on Sam's grief-stricken face. Sam nodded, unable to speak. In his arms, Atlas felt impossibly heavy, as if the dog's death had concentrated all the weight of their shared history into his still form. "How did you know to come?" Sam finally asked O'Brien. The deputy knelt beside him, his weathered face soft with sympathy. "Mrs. Patterson, she never went to bed during the storm, kept watching the ship through her kitchen window. When she saw the tactical lights and heard the generator shut down, she called me. Said something was wrong, that you and Ranger were in danger." Sam closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that his small community had rallied to save him. Mrs. Patterson's vigil, O'Brien's response, even Dr. Reynolds's arrival, they'd all risked the blizzard to help a broken veteran and his dog. "There's something else," Dr. Reynolds said gently. "We found Morrison's files when we raided his operation. Sam, your great-uncle Harold left specific instructions in his will. This collection was always meant for you. Morrison knew that. It's why he targeted you specifically." She produced a weathered envelope marked with Harold Hartwell's distinctive handwriting. "For my great-nephew Samuel, when he needs it most." Inside was a letter dated 3 years earlier, right around the time Sam had found Atlas on that snowy night in Bangor. "My dear Samuel, if you're reading this, you've found both the collection and your courage. I've watched your struggles through friends in the veteran community, and I know the weight you carry from Afghanistan. But I also know the strength that runs in Hartwell blood. This collection isn't just art. It's proof that beauty survives even the darkest times. I've spent 50 years as its guardian, waiting for someone worthy to carry on the mission. You are that person. Use what you find here, not for personal gain, but to help others who have lost their way. Create something that honors those who couldn't come home, and remember that survival is not a burden. It's a responsibility. Your loving great-uncle, Harold. P.S. The dog will find you when you need him most. Trust him completely." Sam stared at the postscript, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. Harold had somehow known about Atlas, had perhaps even arranged their meeting. The old captain had orchestrated everything: the ship's purchase, the dog's appearance, even Sam's discovery of the treasure room. "He knew," Sam whispered. "Harold knew Atlas would come back to me." Dr. Reynolds nodded. Military working dogs form unbreakable bonds with their handlers. "Atlas never forgot you, Sam. He spent 3 years looking for you after the explosion, following some instinct that transcended training." EMTs entered the room with a stretcher, but Sam shook his head. "I'll carry him myself." With O'Brien's help, Sam lifted Atlas's body and began the slow journey through the ship's corridors. FBI agents stepped aside respectfully as they passed, recognizing the sacred nature of a warrior's final march with his fallen companion. Outside, the blizzard was beginning to weaken. Emergency vehicles lined the pier, their red and blue lights painting the snow in patriotic colors. Mrs. Patterson stood in the crowd despite the cold, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks as she saw Sam emerge with Atlas in his arms. "That dog loved you more than life itself," she called out. "He died protecting what mattered most." As they loaded Atlas into the veterinary ambulance that would take him to his final rest, Sam felt something he hadn't experienced since Afghanistan: the presence of his fallen brothers. Not ghosts or hallucinations, but the simple knowledge that sacrifice creates bonds stronger than death. Atlas had completed his mission. The loyal German shepherd had saved his handler one last time, protecting not just Sam's life but his purpose. The collection would be preserved, Harold's legacy would continue, and somewhere in the world beauty would survive another attempt at destruction. Sam placed his hand on the ambulance door as it closed, whispering a final goodbye to the dog who had taught him that loyalty transcends species, that love survives trauma, and that sometimes the greatest treasures can't be measured in money. As dawn broke over Bangor Harbor, painting the snow-covered Aurora Belle in shades of gold and pink, Sam Hartwell began to understand that his real treasure had never been artwork or artifacts. It had been Atlas all along. 6 months later, on a warm July morning that Atlas would have loved, the Aurora Belle Maritime Museum opened its doors to the world. Sam stood on the ship's bridge, wearing his dress uniform for the first time since his discharge, watching as hundreds of visitors streamed across the gangway. Children pressed their faces against display cases. Elderly veterans paused reverently before wartime artifacts, and families gathered around interactive exhibits that told stories of courage, preservation, and hope. The transformation had been remarkable. Working with Dr. Reynolds and a team of international experts, Sam had converted the cruise ship into a floating museum that honored both the collection's history and the man who had protected it. The secret treasure room remained exactly as Harold had left it, now enclosed behind protective glass that allowed visitors to see the climate-controlled vault where priceless artifacts had waited decades for the right guardian. Mrs. Patterson, now the museum's official greeter despite being 79, stood at the entrance wearing a volunteer badge that read Founding Supporter. She handed out pamphlets and shared stories about the young veteran who had risked everything to preserve history. Her pride in Sam was evident to everyone who met her. Tommy had postponed his college plans to work as the museum's education coordinator, developing programs that brought local schools aboard the ship. His natural charisma and genuine enthusiasm made him perfect for connecting with young visitors who might otherwise find history boring. "Uncle Sam," Tommy called from the main deck, "the Korean War vets are here for the ceremony." Sam nodded, touching the small bronze urn on the captain's desk, Atlas's ashes, which would soon find their permanent home in the museum's memorial garden. The German shepherd's sacrifice had inspired donations from around the world, funding not just the museum, but also a scholarship program for disabled veterans and their service animals. The dedication ceremony began at noon with dignitaries from Washington, representatives from major museums, and hundreds of community members who had supported Sam's fight to preserve the collection. But the moment that mattered most came when Sam stepped to the podium, looking out at faces filled with hope and respect. "6 months ago, I thought I was just a broken veteran buying a floating wreck," Sam began, his voice carrying clearly across the harbor. "I had no idea I was inheriting a mission that began in the trenches of World War II and continued through my great-uncle Harold's lifetime of dedication to preserving what others would destroy." He paused, gathering strength for the words he'd rehearsed, but hadn't been sure he could speak. But the real treasure aboard this ship wasn't artwork or sculptures. It was a German shepherd named Atlas, who taught me that loyalty never dies, that love transcends trauma, and that sometimes the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be earned through devotion. The crowd listened in respectful silence as Sam told Atlas's story. The military working dog who had saved his handler's life in Afghanistan, spent 3 years searching for him, and ultimately died protecting the collection that would become his legacy. Atlas understood something I'd forgotten, Sam continued, that survival isn't about what you've lost. It's about what you choose to protect. He gave his life so that these treasures could continue to tell their stories, so that beauty could survive even the darkest times. Dr. Reynolds stepped forward, carrying a bronze plaque that would be mounted beside Atlas's memorial. In memory of Atlas, military working dog who proved that the greatest treasures are earned through loyalty, courage, and unconditional love. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of the museum's centerpiece, a recreation of Harold's captain's quarters, complete with the portrait that had hidden the secret passage. But now the passage was open, inviting visitors to descend into the preservation vault and witness firsthand the collection that Atlas had died protecting. As evening fell and the last visitors departed, Sam found himself alone on the ship's deck with Mrs. Patterson and Tommy. The harbor was peaceful, fishing boats heading out for the night catch, their lights reflecting off the calm water. "He'd be proud of you," Mrs. Patterson said softly, settling into a deck chair with a satisfied sigh. "Harold, I mean." "And Atlas, too." Sam smiled, feeling something he hadn't experienced since before Afghanistan, genuine contentment. The museum was already exceeding projections, with visitors from around the world coming to see the collection and learn about the extraordinary circumstances of its preservation. But more importantly, the Aurora Belle had become what Harold had always intended, a place where history lived, where stories of human resilience inspired new generations to preserve what mattered most. "What's next, Uncle Sam?" Tommy asked, leaning against the rail where Atlas used to stand guard. "We keep the mission alive," Sam replied. "Harold protected these treasures for 50 years. Atlas gave his life to save them. Now it's our turn to make sure they continue to inspire people long after we're gone." A warm breeze carried the scent of salt water and summer flowers from Mrs. Patterson's garden on shore. Somewhere in the distance, a foghorn sounded, not mournful, but welcoming, calling travelers home to safe harbor. Sam thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment, from the darkness of that school bus where he'd planned to end his pain, to the purpose he'd found aboard Harold's ship. Atlas had been his guide through every step, the loyal companion who had shown him that broken things could be made whole, that lost souls could find their way home. The museum would help other veterans discover their own sense of purpose. The scholarship program would ensure that more service animals found homes with those who needed them most. And the collection itself would continue to prove that beauty could survive humanity's worst impulses. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sam opened the bronze urn and scattered Atlas's ashes into the harbor breeze. They drifted across the water like silver dust, settling gently on the waves that would carry them out to sea. "Thank you, boy," Sam whispered, "for everything." In the months that followed, the Aurora Belle Maritime Museum became more than just a tourist attraction. It became a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt lost or broken. Veterans found healing in its corridors, children discovered wonder in its exhibits, and families created memories that would last generations. Sam's story inspired legislation improving services for disabled veterans, and his partnership with Dr. Reynolds led to the recovery of dozens of other lost art collections around the world. The museum's success funded expansion into a full maritime education center, teaching young people about naval history, marine conservation, and the importance of preserving cultural heritage. But perhaps most importantly, the Aurora Belle proved that second chances exist for everyone willing to fight for them. That loyalty can transcend species and circumstance. That love, in its purest form, creates legacies that outlast any individual life. On quiet evenings when the museum was closed and the harbor lay still, Sam would sometimes feel a familiar presence at his side, a warm muzzle against his hand, amber eyes full of unwavering devotion, the spirit of a faithful friend who had taught him that the greatest treasures aren't found in vaults, but in the bonds we forge with those who choose to love us unconditionally. The Aurora Belle sailed on, not through ocean waters but through time itself, carrying its precious cargo of hope into whatever storms lay ahead. And in the memorial garden, where Atlas's bronze statue watched over visitors with protective amber eyes, flowers bloomed year-round, tended by grateful hands that understood the simple truth the loyal German Shepherd had died to preserve. Some things are worth saving, no matter the cost. When Samuel Hartwell lost his leg in Afghanistan, he thought his story was over. Living alone in a converted school bus with his loyal German Shepherd Atlas, he felt forgotten by a world that had moved on without him. But sometimes, our greatest treasures come disguised as our deepest struggles. That abandoned cruise ship he bought with his last $8,847 wasn't just shelter from a Maine winter. It was destiny calling. Inside, Atlas led him to $75 million in preserved artwork. But more importantly, to a purpose that transformed a broken veteran into a guardian of history. Atlas gave his life protecting that collection, proving that loyalty transcends species and that love creates legacies stronger than any fortune. Today, the Aurora Belle Maritime Museum stands as proof that second chances exist for everyone brave enough to fight for them. Sam's story reminds us that our scars don't define our worth, our choices do. Whether you're caring for a beloved pet, preserving family memories, or simply showing up for those who need you most, you're writing a story that matters. Your faithfulness today becomes tomorrow's treasure. What loyal companion, human or animal, has shaped your life's most important chapters? Have you ever discovered that what seemed like an ending was actually a new beginning in disguise? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.